His eyes dripped with wanting. Toxic liquid pooled against his eyelids, eating into his eyeballs before spilling out and tracing stinging paths down his cheeks. He swiped it away absently. Snake venom, he realized, as he undid the accidental transformation. He turned his attention back to the fruit tree. Moonlight lay glistening on its leaves. Tucked against one of them, a single pink fruit shivered in the night chill. The fruit had two plump halves, the smaller stacked on the larger like a little snowman. A cloud drifted over the moon. He transformed into an owl, his pupils expanding to capture the starlight. The fruit was rocking back and forth, as if trying to escape. The cloud drifted further, and moonlight spilled out again. In the middle of the fruit's smaller half, holes appeared suddenly. Two thin slits above a longer gash. The gash split open, and a baby's wail rose from it. Before the sound even reached his ears, he had launched himself toward the tree, air streaming soundlessly under his wings. His talons extended and plucked the fruit, which immediately fell silent. A door burst open, and a man rushed into the yard. He swung his lamp toward the tree, but the owl had already disappeared into the surrounding forest. "Qingfeng," called a sleepy voice. "What are you doing?" "I thought I heard a human fruit ripen," said Qingfeng. He walked around the tree, casting his lamplight at the unripe white lumps hanging from the branches. Unsatisfied, he went back inside, with one last puzzled glance over his shoulder before he shut the door. Perched at the top of a fir tree, the owl morphed into a cackling monkey. He turned the fruit back and forth in his hand, admiring its smooth, soft skin. One of his talons had nicked the surface, and a droplet of clear liquid ran down the side. He licked it up, savoring the subtle sweetness. As soon as his tongue touched the skin, a faint sound began to come from the fruit. He held it up to his ear. It was whispering, in a dozen voices at once, old and young, high and low. "Eat me. You will live 50,000 years. Don't eat me. A stolen life is a curse." Without hesitation, he took a huge bite from the bottom of the fruit. It screamed once, sharp and shrill, and then was quiet. Juice trickled down his chin as he chewed the red flesh. He swallowed, and a tingling sensation traveled down his throat before spreading through his limbs. His body brimmed with unnatural energy. Thoughts that were not his own rooted at the back of his mind. Greed and resentment, intertwined like a vine choking a tree, sprouted and flowered. He smacked his lips and went for another bite. It happens a lot that I come back to my house late from my mother's house, but she almost always takes me home because it's very close. She lives down the street from me. But not that day. That night I was walking back alone, almost getting home. I had already turned the corner when a car stopped next to me. This has already made me alert, as I always am at night at the slightest proximity to anyone, especially a man. A man who looked to be at least 50 years old was driving and started making conversation with me, asking if everything was okay and that I was very pretty. I started to feel uncomfortable there, but then he asked if I wanted him to drop me off at home and give me a ride. My chest tightened even more. I said no, and that it was already close. He insisted some more, but what really intrigued me was that in the passenger seat there was a boy, a child no older than 12 years old. He didn't say anything, just looked at me and the man, following the conversation. I had the sharp door of my key between my fingers, as I always walk on the street at night, and ready to run, when he accepted and gave up, continuing to drive the car. I waited a little before going home, afraid that he would know where I live, and I came back with M. Your heart racing. Sometimes I wonder if that child was in danger or something. Am I being paranoid? I was randomly reminded of an experience I had when I was about 9 years old, and decided to look up and see if anyone had an experience of this before. I found a post on here from about 8 years ago that reported someone saying they had experienced seeing a blue-eyed shadow man when they were little, which is exactly what I remember happening. I was about 9 at the time, and I lived on a ranch with my mom. My room was down the hall from hers, and I usually left my door open at night for whatever reason. I remember I was watching late-night TV in my bed, which was near the foot of my bed. I looked to the right at the doorway and saw this shadow figure peering over the doorway with these impossibly bright blue eyes, whites included. I remember not feeling scared and pretty calm, but we locked eyes, and then he left and went down the hall. I then got out of bed and went to check the hall and saw nothing. My mom was asleep and no one else was in the house. Has anyone ever had this happen to them? It's been days since I've been put into this quarantine. I was exposed to some kind of toxin while assisting in the repairs of a facility for the military. I'm a contractor, so when a military contract becomes available, we all scramble to get it. I'd thought myself lucky at the time to secure it, but looking back now, I'm beginning to have my doubts. We had been putting up pipes in the facility, though we had no idea what would pump through them. We weren't allowed to know. Whatever it was something that would place considerable pressure on the system, so the pipes needed to be thick and durable. I was installing a section when someone, somewhere, accidentally turned on the system, causing the initial exposure. I was like an orange steam that enveloped everyone beneath me. I was high enough that the cloud never reached me, but I was still quarantined for possible exposure. A bunch of personnel in full-body hazmat suits came out and marched us to the field hospital they had set up, made us strip off all our clothes, then zipped us up in these thick, opaque plastic tents that provided just enough room for a bed and a small table next to it. We were allowed to keep our phones, but that's pretty much it. I was thankful for each chance to have some form of entertainment, no matter how meager it was. But after the first day or so, the boredom was becoming unbearable. It wouldn't have been so bad, but all I could make out through the plastic covering my little area was silhouettes, like someone making shadow puppets on the wall. The first night, by the glow of the fluorescent lights, I saw people moving in their tents, some of them looking misshapen and grotesque. It was just their shadows, but I could see masses of flesh bulging on their backs, like some kind of huge tumor growing on them. They would moan in pain and beg to leave, but the personnel ignored them. The second night, the bulges had something protruding from them. It looked like writhing fingers, only longer. Still, it was hard to tell, though the plastic. I would run my hands down the skin of my back, always breathing a relieved sigh every time it continued to feel normal. However, all the relief in the world abandoned me the third night. The shadows in the tent started making growling noises. I watched as they tore through the plastic of their tents and began to mill about the area, listening as the personnel trapped in there would first scream, then gurgle as the shadows loomed over them. I'm fairly certain they're all dead now. I'm trapped in a circle of shadows dancing on the plastic walls. Aroused. And to me, they all seem to have gone quiet, listening as they grow suspicious of the only intact tent in the room. I am a big believer in all things paranormal. Last week I was on a work trip in Los Angeles. I was staying at the Holiday Inn La Mirada. I was put in room 817. The room just smelled awful. But the first 2 nights I got back so late that I thought nothing of it. Finally finished work early Wednesday, so asked to move rooms. Was moved into room 813, only 2 doors down. No weird smell. Anyway, I'm working in my hotel room from about 4 p.m. until 8 p.m., head out to get to-go dinner. Finally laying in bed at 11 p.m., all lights off in my room, just watching Netflix on my iPad. It's 11:30 p.m., and I'm just about to fall asleep and bathroom light clicks on. I immediately rush to the bathroom and nothing out of the ordinary. I had the bathroom light off. I sit back in bed, very spooked. Finally, at 1:30 IME, I decide I have to try to sleep and don't want to be up during the witching hour. The light never turned back on in that time I was awake. I wake up at 5:30 IME and immediately realize my bathroom light is on again in my room. I don't sleepwalk. If it was fault lighting / electric, why in the hours of 4 p.m.? 11:30 p.m. when in my room did the light not malfunction? There was not even a fan in the bathroom, so it couldn't be ventilation. I didn't even have the heat or the cigaron because the temperature of the room was a constant 68. Does anyone know if this hotel or room is haunted? Or does anyone have an explanation that I'm missing as to why my bathroom light was turning on its own? This is an experience I had about 2 years ago. I've had a few sleep paralysis events where I have felt like I have been held down by some invisible force and heard audible growling. Though this experience differs from previous ones, I remember something grabbing me by my legs and forcibly pulling me out of my body. I remember the room was spinning as I was violently thrashed about like a rag doll. Somehow I woke up after, and I jolted out of sleep. I have a theory that my astral body was pulled out or I was dreaming. Either way, it was a disturbing experience. There was one other time I remember falling into a pitch-black void, and I was audibly whimpering. I felt instant dread. I couldn't move, and then finally I was able to wake up. Now, I am a spiritual person, but I don't dabble in the occult. I do believe in the paranormal, but I don't always take things at face value. I like to rule out things before making a rationalized answer. I wonder if anyone out there has had a similar experience, and if so, what is your take on it? Would you consider it paranormal, or just a fabrication of the subconscious mind? Take your time, the officer said in a neutral tone, eyes trained on me. I didn't meet his gaze. Instead, my eyes were locked on the woman laid on the cold sheet of steel. Her eyes were softly shut. She could have been sleeping if it were not for the uncannily pale hue of her flesh. I scanned over her body for any indication that the officer was mistaken. Any slight clue that might hint at a mistaken identity. Her cheek freckles, which she affectionately labeled as her stardust, now blended almost imperceptibly with the off-white flesh. Her messy golden curls, which once bounced every time she giggled, now lied unspooled and motionless over the slab. Her pale pink lips, which embraced mine every morning, now glistened a sickly yellow under the buzz of the fluorescent lighting. As my eyes trailed down her body, I recalled every mark and imperfection. The birthmark on her collarbone, the mole over her right breast, the scar just below her navel. My eye was drawn to the slight tan line on her left ring finger. However, the police never found the wedding ring with her belongings. How long has she? My throat tightened as I became unable to finish the sentence. Coroner said she's been dead for about a week. My stomach twisted and churned at the officer's words. It was true. She was no longer a person. She could no longer talk or laugh or kiss. I rasped out the two hardest syllables of my life barely above a squeak. It's her. The pit in my stomach grew deeper as my throat clenched out 3 more words. It's my wife. The room began spinning as my vision blurred and my heart pounded against my ribcage. I'm sorry for your loss. I could barely hear the officer over the singular thought which grew louder with every second. If she's here, then what is in our house? What did I leave alone with our child? The poisoned darts ceased their lethal dance. The blade-lined corridors no longer whispered death. I had conquered every ancient trap this tomb could muster, my torch illuminating the path ahead to what must be the burial chamber. But something felt wrong about these mechanisms. They weren't designed with the precision I'd seen in other tombs. The spinning blades were angled oddly, hurting rather than killing. The dark trajectories created a clear, albeit dangerous, path forward. That's when I noticed the claw marks. Not on the walls or floor, but on the stone doors, on the inside. Countless deep gouges in the rock, all facing inward, as if something had spent centuries trying to claw its way in. And I had just disabled every barrier keeping it contained. Behind me, in the darkness beyond my torchlight, I heard stone grinding against stone, and breathing. Ancient, hungry breathing. For some context, I'm Native American, belong to 2 tribes, and AMP, in my culture, we are aware of the existence of certain things. I won't say the name because you are not supposed to, but they have been appropriated a lot on TikTok the past few years. For a while now, I have had some odd dreams. The first dream I had with it, was about a year ago. I was walking down a path near my house when I saw something moving in the grass beside me. It was something writhing and contorting. Its skin was a raw red, with bones jutting out from the flesh. No real form to it, just flesh and bones. It crawled slowly, unable to move well. I woke up as soon as I saw it clearly. The second dream was about a house, unfamiliar to me. I woke up in the dream and had a sense of pure dread, like something truly horrifying was going to happen. I got up and looked out the window, and there, below the fencing, sat a coyote. It looked like an ordinary coyote, minus the fact that its feet were twisted backwards. It just stared at me, didn't move or anything, but I have never felt more afraid of anything. I got a knife from the kitchen and shouted out the window to leave. I woke up. After the second dream, I noticed that as soon as it got dark, I heard the sounds, animals that were not local to my area. I didn't question it though, not until I noticed that it sounded more like someone, or something, trying to imitate those animals. Then I started to feel anxious. The sounds continued every night. As time went on, I started to hear screaming every night, from down the street, not from any of the houses, but from the actual street itself. I didn't say anything to my family though. Every night the screaming sounded like it was getting closer. The animal sounds were more frequent, and I started hearing weird noises on the roof and amp size of the house. It sounded like heavy and inhumanly fast footsteps running, which is impossible considering it was on the actual sides of the house. Nothing can run like that. Until one night, I swear, I had that same awful dread I felt in my second dream. I went downstairs to check on my family and everything seemed fine. They were just watching TV. But I noticed the back door was open and Amp, my cat, was sitting in front of it upset. Her ears were flat against her head and she was growling, which turned to hissing. I looked out the back door but could see nothing, just pitch black darkness. But I had this feeling something was watching us, and still that feeling of pure fear. My cat kept hissing, and I slammed the door, alarming my parents. They asked what was wrong, but my cat and I both just ran upstairs afraid. Since then we have moved, but I still think about it often. I really do wonder if it was the same thing for my culture. If so, I hope it isn't following me. I hope it leaves us alone.